Hello and welcome to the Infinity Bros podcast, the only podcast that's perfectly balanced as all things should be. My name is Isaac and Zayne. I'm your host tonight. I have one other Infinity Bro with me. It is the enigma of the Infinity Bros universe, Zayne Ellis.
Hello. It is another Zayne and Isaac mess around. Thank you for joining us.
Good old Zayne and Isaac mess around, recording in the morning. Nobody else does that because they're at work, but here we are, ready to talk about all of the things that are happening in the entertainment business.
It's like they don't even want to take part in these conversations.
Yeah, are they even really serious about being a part of the Infinity Bros? I don't think they really are. Like, if you're not quitting your job to be a podcaster, then are you really serious about it?
I'm beginning to feel like they are the enigma, and I am not. Like, we've kind of shifted now.
How the turntables.
How the turntables. That's right.
Wild. Yeah, wild. I mean, Max is basically the new enigma of the Infinity Bros podcast, because if you have joined us in the past year, you probably have no idea who Max is. That's kind of wild to think about. Max has been nearly absent from the Infinity Bros for almost a year now. Welcome, new listeners, to the Infinity Bros podcast. We're a group of 6 guys who rotate, talk about what's going on in pop culture today. Talk about TV, film, video games, Marvel, Star Wars, all the nerdy things that we're interested in. Zayne and I, specifically, are very interested in Star Wars. So we're going to talk about the Acolyte episodes. Which ones did we even talk about last time? 3 and 4? 5 and 6. That's what we're talking
5
about
and 6,
tonight. Episodes 5 and 6. We're going to talk about The Boys. Episodes 4 and 5. And I'm trying to keep track of all this, Zayne.
Right?
Keep me accountable. And House of the Dragon, episodes 2 and 3.
Yes.
And honestly, we could talk a little bit about The Bear. Have you watched season 3 at all yet?
I've started it. I'm only a couple episodes in.
Okay. We're going to save that for its very own episode later on this summer.
Probably smart.
Because there's that's a conversation in and of itself. I actually really like that we're getting back to weekly episodes on Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, all these things, because I feel like the anticipation for those episodes is, it's palpable for me. I get excited when, an episode of The Acolyte is coming out, or I realize that we were talking about this on the Patreon version of the podcast. There's been so much TV coming out this month that I'm like, I'm not keeping up very well of like when stuff is coming out. But when I see that there's a new episode of The Boys or House of the Dragon on their respective platforms, I'm like, holy crap, yeah, let's go. I can't wait. It's been a crazy month. House of the Dragon, The Acolyte, The Boys, The Bear. This year is crazy for TV, dude.
Well, especially June. Everything's come out in the past month.
Yeah.
It was so dry, like all of spring. We were just like scratching for anything to watch.
Yeah. We even had a couple of our old school episodes of like top 6s and hot and snot, nerd news,
right?
All that good stuff. And you can go back into our catalog and listen to some of those old school COVID episodes where, I don't know, I don't feel like we're scrounging for content, because we could talk about movies and TV and Star Wars and Marvel for hours and hours and hours. Like
easily.
That, we don't have a problem with content. That's not our problem. But we weren't talking about anything new for a long time, and that forced us to come up with some more creative segments, which honestly I kind of miss. I kind of miss those days a little bit. Those are the good old days of the Infinity Bros podcast.
This is true.
Anyways, back to what we're talking about. The Bear released all 10 episodes on Hulu last week, and I have watched all of them, but I don't know, the binging, back when Netflix started that binging concept, when they started dropping shows like all at once on their platform, everybody was like, this is the best thing ever. I can consume all this content all the time. But now I feel like there's something missing when you binge something. Like, I go online to talk about it, and sure, people are talking about it for the first 2 weeks that it drops, but then after that, the conversation kind of just like dwindles. Whereas these weekly shows, you're like, yes, what's happening next? Like, oh yeah, I'm so excited for, what is coming up this season. Whereas you don't really get that weekly discussion with the binge drops of all these platforms. So I don't know how to feel about that, but The Bear was very good. So there's that.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Well, I think part of it too is just flipped over the years because I'm assuming like the networks or the people on the other side can see it too that like people binge stuff so much, but then like the viewership of stuff has to drop off so rapidly on the binge model.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
if you do, an episode a week, or even like some shows will do like two a week, or you'll start with two, or some of those models, like I feel like you consistently keep the viewership up
Mm-hmm.
throughout the same. But
Right.
like, yeah, when it was the brand new thing to binge, like that was the huge thing. Everyone just binged it. You watched through the whole thing. You wanted that whole story. But I think now people have kind of been binged out, so to speak, and it's just gotten to that point you're like, yeah, I'd rather kind of let some of this digest a little bit more, kind of go episode by episode.
Yeah.
Now granted, I think just by the nature of some shows work far better on a binge model
That's
than
true.
on a weekly model. So I think part of it is kind of figuring out like what kind of show you have and which would fit better. But yeah, it's definitely moved more away from, all right, let's just binge everything. And maybe that's just the millennial in me of the nostalgia of having to watch something on TV
Yeah.
once a week.
Dude, that's
That's
wild to
just
think about, that Gen Z and whatever they're calling the next one, like Gen Alpha, will not
yeah,
know. I
right,
mean, I guess they actually will, because now these platforms are coming back to that weekly format.
right.
But it is wild to think that, they just, when we were kids, it was nearly impossible to watch a whole show because you had to figure out the time that everything was dropping. And if you missed it,
You missed it.
guess what? You missed it.
Like,
You
great,
you
that was
can't
it.
go back and watch that again.
You had
Like,
to set up a recorder or find
yeah,
some way of recording it because yeah, if you
right.
missed it, you'd have to wait for reruns someday to go back
Yeah,
and watch the episode you missed.
right. That's
Like,
why my TV show viewing experience as a kid was so spotty. Like, I loved the animated Spider-Man series, but I still to this day have not watched the whole series because I just got episodes here and there as a kid. And then I have worked my way through most of the show as an adult. But yeah, as a kid, I barely saw half of that show because I would just caught episodes when I could on TV, and it just, yeah, it wasn't a complete experience. And still, I mean, it still was amazing, and is probably the reason why I love superheroes today. Like, it started that, interest in me. But yeah, it's so different now, which is crazy. Like, my kids are gonna grow up with smartphones, not knowing what it was like to not have a phone and to sit at the school telephone, because my parents weren't there yet, and I had to like get picked up from some practice or something, and I didn't
yep,
have a cell phone to call them and be like, "Hey, I'm done with practice."
right,
So the school telephone was where I hung out, like
yep,
for a good chunk of my high school days. That's
yep.
where I was sitting, hanging out by the telephone, waiting for my parents to come and pick me up for practices. Kids don't know that feeling anymore,
They don't.
No,
Totally different era.
wild stuff. But anyways, you can check out The Infinity Bros at theinfinitybros.com. You can find all our links there to our previous episodes. You can catch us on Drip with Robbie cracking packs and shipping them out. A lot of fun stuff to be involved in if you're a Magic the Gathering fan, on our TikTok and Instagram. Also, like I said, our past episodes, we have a couple Magic the Gathering episodes in there, but all sorts of reviews in our backlog of TV show reviews, a lot of Star Wars stuff, which we'll dive into in a bit here. Zane and I are like leading the charge on our Star Wars content on our podcast here, talking way too much about things that don't really matter, but we're nerding out about it. Check out theinfinitybros.com for
Yes.
more of that. Before we get going, we have a special rating system that we use on the Infinity Bros podcast.
Here on the Infinity Bros podcast, everything is ranked from a 0 to 6 point scale. 0 meaning horrible, and 6 meaning absolutely excellent. If all of the Infinity Bros rank something a 6, it gets an Infinity Step.
All right, Zane, here we go. We're going to talk House of the Dragon, The Boys first, and save the Acolyte for later, because I know that we're going to spend probably more time than we have available to talk about that, because it's Star Wars and that's what we nerd out about. But The Boys and House of the Dragon has also been coming out weekly. Which one do you want to talk about first, Zane?
Let's just do House of the Dragon. Why
Let's
not?
So we reviewed episode 1, the premiere, on episode 201 of the Infinity Bros podcast. Make sure you go check that out on our backlog. We're going to talk about episodes 2 and 3, which episode 3 just dropped a couple days ago. We're recording on Wednesday morning. Just dropped on Sunday. So hopefully we can get this episode out before the next episode drops. Rhaenyra the Cruel, episode 2, and The Burning Mill, episode 3. And because we're going to be spoiling all of the shows that we're talking about today, I'm just going to give a general spoiler warning for all of the latest episodes of The Boys, House of the Dragon, and The Acolyte.
This is...
Prepare yourself.
An Infinity Bros.
Prepare yourself.
Spoiler. Warning.
Lots of crazy stuff happening in episode 2, we mentioned. Big things that I wanted to talk about are, at the end of episode 1, we get, what do they call them? Blood and Cheese, I think their names are, murdering Jaehaerys, which is the heir to the throne, Aegon's son. And episode 2 starts off with a bang. Aegon, freaks out, as we all knew he would. Aegon's, the last episode, we're comparing him to Joffrey in terms of just, unpredictability and instability, just have this dude's gonna go off the rails at some point and we just don't know when. He's like a ticking time bomb, and he kind of does a little bit. I feel like it is slightly more calculated than I expected. He gets a little bit of insight as to what happens. Totally destroy. They find the guy that did it, one of them anyways, gets some information out of him by beating it out of him, and then hangs all of the rat catchers that have worked in the castle. So they've been building this case of building trust with the people, and then all of a sudden Aegon's screw that, right. I'm going to hang all the rat catchers that have worked in the castle. And you see that scene of all the people coming to all those dudes that were hung, and yeah, man, it's pretty wild. What did you think of that? And do you think that Aegon was crossing the line a little bit there, or was this a calculated response from him?
Well, that was a wild, that was kind of that first bit where you kind of see a bit of that madness that you're just well, part of that, is just that the youth not listening to the elder or the people around him, kind of the hot-headed, he's the king, he's gonna do what he wants, which kind of created that perfect storm. But when Hightower eventually comes in and it's just scolds him on it, it's just we did all this stuff with that funeral to garner support of the people, and then you just went and threw it all away. So it's just it's you're seeing that it's the unchecked power, that he's the power of the king, but it's just everyone else around him sees that well, if you lose the people, you're gonna lose everything else,
right? And
he just doesn't see that part yet. And when his whole nickname goes on to be Aegon the Terrible, and all these nicknames he gets, you realize well, he never really gets it figured out, obviously. But yeah, you just see that and you're just oh, that sucks. But then you're also just well, I'm glad I didn't, wasn't alive in those times that it's based off of. Because could you imagine if in a real world perspective, you were just a rat catcher, and if that happened in a real back then, just all right, we're just gonna hang all the rat catchers. You're just
yeah.
Why don't you just go find the one that you're looking for?
If President Biden found out that somebody was committing treason, and then he's just all right, all construction workers in America,
right? Every single
just
one,
hang them all.
You're wait, what?
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 Excuse me? I guess it would be more plumbers that have worked in the White House type.
All the janitors at the White House.
All the janitors at the White House. Yeah, just going off, and everybody's like, oh my. So backtracking a little bit before that, Otto Hightower, he's the hand to Egan, has been coming up with all the schemes basically, and has been scheming since season 1, but between like basically securing the throne for Alicent and her heirs and blah blah blah, all that stuff. He comes up with this plan after the beheading of Jaehaerys to get the people on their side by doing this giant funeral procession, right? And so we see this is I feel like very end of episode 1 and episode 2, we're getting into Game of Thrones territory as far as like how the show feels, and I don't think I felt like that almost all of episode 1 or season 1, excuse me. I don't know, there was just a different feel to season 1. Like there wasn't as much drama, or the drama was all under the surface. Like, the characters weren't exploding with rage at every turn like we got in Game of Thrones, and now all of this stuff is finally like bubbling up to a head.
Right.
Pardon my pun there. So that the funeral procession, I totally thought, and it happened for a half second where the procession like stopped, and like they were trying to say like, Helena, and how the royalty people are like so out of touch with the people that this was freaking Helena out. Like she didn't want all these, commoners, reaching out to her next to her or whatever. But I thought they were showing that. I thought Jaehaerys' head was going to roll off of the cart, and Helena was going to freak out. I was like waiting for that to happen. And when the cart stopped, I was like, oh boy, here we go. And it didn't. And I was like, as a parent, I'm kind of glad it didn't, because that would be horrifying. But at the same time, that would be so Game of Thrones if it did.
That would be very Game of Thrones, yeah.
But yeah, I was just like waiting for that to happen. And when it didn't, I was like, okay, all right. It's probably okay. Probably okay that it didn't happen. But yeah, we get this funeral procession, and it's basically to get the people to see that, Rhaenyra is the bad guy in this scenario. And then we talked about earlier, Egan just goes and kind of ruins all that.
Throws it away. Like, okay.
Yeah, I don't care about the people. I'm the king. So, and Otto goes in there. Oh my gosh. This was another very sad, like, for Game of Thrones fans, most of you guys have like a character that you didn't like in the series, and when they died, you're like, oh yeah, great. Like, it's a nice, satisfying death, right? Like, that was Joffrey for me in Game of Thrones. When Joffrey died, I was like, yes, I'm 100% on board. That dude is the worst. But when Otto Hightower gets canned by Egan in that moment, I was like, let's go. Finally, this guy is getting what he probably deserves, right? I mean, obviously not death, but
it's about time it's coming back to bite him in the butt. Like,
and even better that he just is like, yeah, Kristen Cole's my hand. Just turns around to this random dude behind him, and he's like, yeah, give it to him.
Yeah, just straight up, like, oh, okay.
Otto is just like
makes it which then just makes it even worse to add into that. Now, granted, you can't see it from like Otto's perspective, but like everything with Yab from Aegon so far, like Kristen Cole is like the worst person in this series so far. Yeah. I cannot wait for a satisfying death for that guy.
He's like, it's coming to him, dude, and I can't wait for it either. Because going from season 1 where I was actually like, I liked him a lot and was rooting for him, and then his turn at the end of the season is like, this guy.
I am completely off your bandwagon. I hope you get everything that's coming to you. I want you to have just a terrible death, because
dude made a pretty epic turn into the most hated character on this show.
easily.
And so he turns around, throws him the hand thing, and you can see on Cole's face, like, he's over his head. Like, he knows it too. It is hilarious that Egan was just like, so impulsive that he gives Cole the hand, even though he's known Cole for what? Like, I mean, he's probably known him for longer, but we don't see any of that interaction until this season in a scene or two. You know, like he doesn't know this guy at all. And he's just like, hey, you can bend my hand. It's
Yeah,
fine.
right. Let's give it to him.
Like,
Like,
even
oh,
you would think that even what's his face, the crippled dude. I
oh,
forget his name.
the what is it? Yeah, like the
Terran
mass.
or
I don't remember his name, but he's like the Master of Whispers or whatever.
Master. Yeah, he named him
Yeah.
in episode 3. He named him as like Master of Whispers or whatever. But like, even he would make a better hand, right?
Right,
Like, because
literally.
he's like a schemer. That's like
Right.
quite kind of what you need, a guy who like knows what's up to, you know, kind of work behind the scenes type of thing
Right.
as your hand.
But at the
Christian
same
Cole
time,
has zero clue what's going
right,
on.
absolutely not. Well, granted, too, I think you can't waste that on that guy either, because I think he's supposed to be like the little finger of the
True.
series, so you kind of need that separate character. But
Right, that's true. And
yeah,
and he that specifically, that character is going to work way better in the background, like, you know, figuring stuff out, as opposed to like kind of being in the limelight as a hand a little bit.
right.
But I love that Kristen Cole's just like has zero, like he shows up late to that meeting and everybody's just like, this guy,
right? This guy, this guy.
this guy. I love it, man. I love the turn, and I can't wait, like you said, for his inevitable demise in this season.
I hope it's terrible. I hope it's just.
Another interesting part of season 2, Kristen Cole. Oh, this dude, man. And actually, this goes into. Does it go into season 3? Or I don't remember. I get these two episodes are kind of blurring together for me. But like, Kristen Cole has the brilliant idea to basically frame the murder of Jaehaerys on Sir. Was it Eric? Eric and what's his brother's name? I forget his other brother's name. But he's like, oh yeah, it's your fault. And then,
right, like what?
Basically tells him to go kill himself by trying to murder Rhaenyra. Oh my gosh. I was like, this makes me hate this dude so much, because those guys are pretty good characters. I like them. And then they actually have a pretty epic like battle, pretty cool scene. And this is like, that's classic Game of Thrones. Like, twin brothers going at it, killing each other. Like, let's go, right? That's what we're expecting from a Game of Thrones spinoff. So kudos to them for diving into the full vibe of Game of Thrones with that. A little sad because I like those guys.
Yeah.
But
definitely those guys. I mean, I suppose that's just the whole overarching thing of anything Game of Thrones. Those are two guys that definitely didn't deserve to go out the way they did.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, you get it. It was a cool fight, cool moment, very Games of Thrones. But yeah, you look at it and you're like, those guys deserve better than that.
I mean, yeah, that's like you said, that's just the nature of Game of Thrones. Like, all the characters that you like are going to die. All the characters you hate are going to live for a really long time before they eventually die. I mean, they're going to die.
Because they're scumbags.
But they're going to live for a lot longer than you want them to.
Right.
So yeah. And then, you know, after that, we also get Daemon kind of going off the rails, which you kind of knew eventually he was going to do. Like, he's not going to sit there and like do nothing and be submissive for forever, because he's Daemon, and he's just, that's not in his nature. So he goes off the rails, goes to Harrenhal, which I've not read any Game of Thrones like Fire of Song and Ice or A Song of Fire and Ice books or anything like that. So this, like, you know, all of the lore and stuff is all new to me. But apparently Harrenhal is a haunted castle, which we get a little snippet of in season 3, where he has that like, or episode, I keep saying season, episode 3, he has that like nightmare vision type of thing. And then the random chick's just like, you're going to die here.
Right. Oh, well then.
Oh, okay. And apparently that chick is an important character in Game of Thrones too. So, we'll probably see more.
I missed that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Again, this is all new stuff. Like, to me, she's a random chick, and I have no idea.
Well, I wonder, how that's going to tie, because this show is, what is it, like 400 years before Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I think it's like 200. I think it's 200 years before Game of
Is it?
Thrones.
Oh, 200.
Yeah, somewhere in that
Yeah,
range.
that sounds about
But like,
right.
yeah, none of these guys. Obviously, we hear tales of King Aegon is like the main one. We hear snippets of like the houses, all that stuff. But like most of these characters, you don't know anything about from
Right.
watching Game of Thrones because this is 200 years prior.
Right.
Little side note on that. I saw somebody comment on social media, really interesting, that I was like, I kind of want to be on their side, but also at the same time, uh, so they commented, this is 200 years before Game of Thrones, and technology basically does not advance at all in 200 years until Game of Thrones. And I was like, that's kind of true, but at the same time, I mean, technology didn't advance a whole lot in the medieval times, in hundreds of years either. So I guess it could be, you know, fair that there isn't a whole lot of technology advancement, but I thought that was an interesting comment. What do you think about that?
I mean, I get it. Like if you look at kind of at a realistic look for it, but I also feel like just in a setting of a show like that, like you're not necessarily looking and on technological advancement because you still want stuff to kind of fit the setting of the show.
Right.
And you could also make an argument then that the reason why there's a feeling of a lack of technological advancement is because it's coming with Aegon, it's coming down with the House Targaryen. Like they basically run Westeros into the ground. Like
Mm.
everyone's scared. Like so, you could make an argument that well, maybe technology got set back because of Dragonfire, because they killed off anyone who could have advanced stuff. Like
That's true.
you could make a solid argument that
Yeah.
it's maybe there wasn't advanced because the people in charge weren't trying, there wasn't those advancements
Mhm.
or it was kept secret. But I think
Yeah.
to the overarching part is just like, well, yeah, it's a 200-year gap, but I'm not watching that show to find technological advancements. I'm
Well,
watching for fire breathing
right.
dragons and
That's what it really comes down to is this is a medieval high fantasy. I don't care about
Right.
technological advancement. I want to see medieval high fantasy. So
right. I don't need to see Aegon pull out an M4 and
yeah, exactly.
even though now that I say that, it'd be kind of
Now,
cool.
right, and now that you say that, it would be pretty cool, actually. But yeah, I mean, you could even make the same. I mean, if we're being real nitpicky, you could make the same argument in Star Wars because,
right,
there is stuff happening over a millennia, and Jedi are still using lightsabers during the prequel trilogy, and they've been around for tens of thousands of years. Like,
but like lightsabers are cool though.
but they're cool.
They're cool.
It's a sci-fi space opera.
Right.
I don't want to see anything different.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
fine the way it is. They don't need to change it. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, being nitpicky, you could apply that to probably any franchise that happens over hundreds to thousands of years.
Right.
That's just how it goes. But that's not what we're watching for. We're watching for dragonfire and lightsabers.
That's right. Now, if we can find a way to combine the two.
oh boy. Wow. Now I just have to sit and think about that for a couple minutes here. That would be amazing. A Jedi riding a fire-breathing dragon.
Don't even get me excited like that. How cool that would be.
It's too late. We already got you excited about it.
Oh my goodness.
Anyways, pretty solid episodes of House of the Dragon. I continue to like this season more than last season so far. There are definitely more Game of Thrones vibes to me. I wasn't a huge fan of all the time jumping they did in season 1.
That got very confusing.
Yep. I feel like it just threw off the overall vibe of the show.
Well, the vibe, and it just kind of messed with the pace.
Right.
Like it just made it feel, it just made it feel more clunky, and you're just like it wasn't terrible, but you were also just kind of like, okay.
Also, not to mention the child actors in season 1 are great. And I would have
Yeah.
liked to have more
More
time
of them,
with
yeah,
them, right?
to
Instead
flesh
of
that
just like
out.
3 episodes per arc or what,
Like
whatever it was.
run that like the whole first season of the
Yeah,
younger, and
right.
then now granted, I get they wanted a different story to tell and jump stuff up, but it was just like I don't think anyone would have complained with a whole first season of them younger and then going older for season 2.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see. Like I said, I mean, it just changes the whole trajectory of the season when you're sticking with a linear story now,
Right.
like they are. And I'm enjoying it more because of that. I think overall, I'd probably give those 2 episodes a solid, like, I'd give them 5.5 maybe out of 6. Like, solid episodes. I feel like we're building up to something really big at the end of the season, and I'm very excited for that. Overall, loving the season though. What would you rate these 2 episodes?
Yeah, I think I'd agree on that. Like they're fives. Like it's still building, but it wasn't like it's kind of met the expectation. It's been good. It had good moments. It's developing that story, but like there hasn't been anything that's knocked my socks off.
Right.
Like in episode 1. Like so that's why I still think the peak is still episode 1 and it's come down a
You're
little
right.
bit.
The last 2 minutes of episode 1 have been the peak of this season, I feel
so
like.
far.
So far, absolutely. And we're going to get, I mean, we're gearing up for war right now. So like we're going to get some dragon battles. We're going to get some cool stuff later this season.
It's going to go back up. But yeah, just for the 2 and 3, like you said too, it's 2 and 3 have done way more to set up what's coming, and it's entertaining enough, and it's been done well.
Yeah,
but solid episodes, but yeah, nothing mind blowing.
All right, moving on to The Boys season 4, episodes 4 and 5. So we talked about the premiere drop of 3 episodes on episode 201 of the Infinity Bros podcast. But yeah, episodes 4 and 5 show up. Oh boy, episode 4, man. You mentioned in our group chat that might be a top 5.
It's like a top 5 of the entire series, in my opinion.
Series. So we get Firecracker announcing her new series, Truth Bomb, and they set up opposite of Firecracker's basically headquarters. And
Starlight's headquarters.
Sorry. Yeah, I said Firecracker. But Starlight's headquarters, we get a showdown between them, which seeing Starlight beat the crap out of Firecracker, that was satisfying. That was very nice.
And not only the extra touch to that, then that conversation her and Oracle have later, how she's like, you set her up, and then Oracle was just like, yeah. Like, you knew Oracle was like, yeah, I want you to just get the crap beat out of you.
Sister Sage, right?
Or Sister Sage, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I had Batman on my mind. So I was going
yeah, she does kind of play that Oracle role. You're not wrong. But
I just had to laugh at that because it was just like, nah, you set me up. And she was like, yeah.
And
like, right. yeah,
and yeah, I absolutely set you up. I love that Firecracker. Like, oh man, it's just so poetic. Like, Firecracker thinks she holds her fate in her hands, right? Like being on the 7, and when she realizes she's being played like that, she just hates it. And oh man, this is just, it's so great. Like how it just emulates real life. How you got all these like grifters on both sides of the political aisle who think they're doing something, and then they realize that they're just like pawns in the grand scheme of things. Man, there's some top tier political satire in this show, and I continue to be baffled by the haters of this show being like, season 4 is woke. Like, man, you haven't been paying attention if you think season 4 is woke. This is what this whole show is about, man.
Right.
Wild. But all that aside, episode 4 is not great because of the political satire. It's great because of the story of Homelander going back to his roots and back to the lab that he grew up in. Wow. There is some like Anthony Starr plays Homelander. This dude better get an Emmy nomination.
I was going to say he deserves something for that whole scene, that whole multiple scenes strung together. Like that was so good. Like And it wasn't even just I mean, obviously it's the acting, but it was just like the way he did. Like you legit felt like that terror that you're just like, it was so well done, and yeah, it just had that moment
Right.
that you're just sitting there, kind of jaw to the floor a little bit. That you're just like, oh my goodness.
And
It
we've
was
been
such a
raving.
heavy. I like didn't mean to cut you off, but like that was such
Yeah,
a
that's fine.
heavy thing, and the reason for me at least why I think that kind of goes in the top five, like it had those feelings that you could call back earlier of the airplanes scene with him and Queen
Yeah,
Maeve. It
right.
had that heavy implication to it, and so that was just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. We've been raving about like Anthony Starr in this whole, series. He has been phenomenal throughout. But yeah, like you said, this is one of those scenes that shows you why he's so good. Just perfectly scripted, perfectly acted. Dude is terrifying. And, it shows it with, the one guy specifically that, man, I struggle to even talk about this because we strive to be like a family type
Right.
friendly podcast. It's hard to talk about the boys in a clean way,
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're not
honestly.
wrong.
But so, okay, parents, once again, avert your kids' ears for a couple of minutes here. So the one guy specifically that he makes like jerk off in front of the whole crew. Oh man, that is just terrifying and so sad. Like you're just like you feel so bad for the guy, but also you kind of throughout this scene, obviously Homelander is the bad guy. Like if you didn't see that before this season, like
What have you been watching?
what have you been watching? Like, yeah, there's some people out there, and this is granted, this is a very, very, very small minority that are like, saying that now all of a sudden they've ruined Homelander's character. Like, what have you been watching this whole time?
Right.
Dude's like
Dude's
terrifying,
never
like
had
villain the
character.
whole
Right.
time.
Right.
But like this is just top tier. Like you almost start feeling a little sympathetic towards him because as he's going through this episode, you're seeing the environment that he grew up in. Like you're seeing flashbacks from him of being in this tank, them doing like experiments on him, and he says to one of the like lab assistants, he was like, "It didn't burn me, it didn't scar me, but it still hurt really bad.
Right.
Like it's still I felt all of the things you were doing to me, even though it didn't like physically do anything to me. Like he was still being tortured, you know."
Right.
And so you start to feel this like little sense of sympathy. I mean, quickly snuffed out by all the stuff he does in this episode. But holy man, the last minute or two of that episode are maybe the most powerful in this whole series. Where he, Barbara, who is like the leader he grew up with, she was the one that kind of was in charge of his childhood, basically. She like comes back in the midst of him like torturing all these people. And I mean, we don't even get a whole lot of interaction, but the final scene of him going up in the elevator covered in blood, and then it flashes back to he put everybody in that room, including Barbara, slaughtered everybody except for her, and then locked her in there. Wow. Like
Damn.
that's like one of the most diabolical things that he has done in this entire series.
Right.
Just wow.
Nuts.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, even how he like preambled that with like, I'll show you why I always like called it the bad room, and then just that in there and just locked in. It's just like, oh my goodness. It's that heavy. It's just like,
heavy stuff, right? Exactly. Just wild stuff. And then we get the kind of, I don't know, this is the part of the season that I haven't felt like is as strong as the rest of it, but we get that side story of Huey's dad, who had a stroke at the beginning of the season, and Huey steals or convinces A-Train to steal some V from Homelander's like apartment. Another funny little side feud between Ashley and A-Train.
Right.
Ashley gets done taking a dump in Homelander's toilet. Like, out of all the petty ways to get back at him, that's just it's peak The Boys humor. Right
Oh
there.
yeah,
Love
100%.
But so they have this little minor feud. But A-Train steals some V. Huey has this choice of like, hey, do I give my dad V, potentially make him into a soup, monster, or just kind of let him die? Like, has this choice, ends up choosing to just kind of let him be, but then his mom injects Hugh's dad with the V and goes on a crazy rampage, killing people throughout
That
the
was
house.
wild.
That
was
was
very wild.
And that was probably the best part of that arc, honestly, because
Yeah.
up until that point, I was like, man, this is just kind of slow moving. And yeah, it is like, it is touching because him and his dad were so close. But I just felt like that part got dragged out longer than it needed to be. Like, we could have gotten this section back in episode 2 or 3, I feel like,
Well,
I don't
part of
know.
me
What do
feels
you
like
feel about that?
I just feel like it's getting drug out because I feel like it wants to set this up of something kind of to enrich or add more depth of Huey, because Huey, the entire series, just the punching bag basically. He's walked over all of Red Butcher. He's always like, it almost just feels like it's something to add a little. I don't know if closure is the right word, but something just to add some more of that human element to Huey's story. But like, even still, the entire time of watching it, I don't trust Huey's mom. I
Yeah,
think
dude.
like, there's something that the way everything's gone in the show with Huey, that Huey's that character that you just feel like if he's going to get a happy ending, it's going to be at the very end of the show.
Right. We got a little snippet. So, like, right when we met her, she was like, she said that she was a Vought, like, essential oils consultant or something.
Right.
And that was the thing that initially was like, I
Right.
don't really trust
And
her.
then
And then gained trust up until she injected the V into Huey's dad. And I was
right.
like,
And then
something's
she
off.
and then she totally gaslights Huey with it, just like, oh, I thought that's what you wanted, that's why you had it.
Mhm.
It's like, well, no, he left it in his coat pocket.
No, Zane gas lamps.
Gas lamping,
Gas
that's right.
lamps, Huey.
But like, you even like, that's what I noticed too. You go back and watch that episode, like, she looks at Huey's pocket, like, it's like she knows he has the V in there. He never,
right.
Like, I don't trust it. There's something else that's going to be some sort of reveal later on with Huey's mom.
Yeah,
I do not trust her at all.
I'm with you.
I think that's more of the point of that kind of side story, to kind of lull us into like, oh, it's a sad thing. Huey's dad died, but his mom's back. But I don't think it's for altruistic reasons.
I'm with you. I do think that little side story is another avenue for them to just let Jack Quaid be the incredible actor that he is. I think he's been a highlight of this show.
Yeah.
So I think that's another reason why they're like, yeah, let's like kind of drag this out to like, because Jack Quaid, like, he's the reason why that storyline works, because he's just a great actor. So, well,
not only that too, but like, I love Simon Pegg, who plays Simon Pegg. Dad, just like,
he's a really fun part of this series.
Right. So I'm just like, you got to give me some Simon Pegg in this season too. And like, it made it kind of the tragic story, but I'm like, all right, I'm glad we got some decent amount of him in an episode, not just him in a hospital bed,
Exactly. Yeah. That was a great, crazy way to kind of like wrap up his story. But man,
that whole scene when he's running in and that dude's like flirting with the nurse and he materializes and does a full 360 in there, you're just like,
there's like,
oh my gosh,
blood and body parts like dropping beneath
like,
the bed.
Oh
like,
my goodness.
Wow. I mean, in true The Boys fashion, but
100%. But I just like watched that. I was like, I was not expecting this hospital scene to take this turn, but it was just like, my.
Absolutely. Speaking of true The Boys fashion, So moving on to episode 5, we get Giancarlo Esposito back, which I did not see coming. I
Yeah.
kind of forgot about him, to be completely honest. Edgar Stan, who is Victoria Newman's like adopted dad, I guess,
Kind of,
and
yeah.
yeah, they break him out of prison to basically get the virus that we went over in what was the frick? What was
From
the
Gen V.
Gen V? Like
The soup virus that
soup
they
virus that they
invented,
make in
yeah.
that spin-off show, which that show is also phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a boys fan, you've already watched that because that's a great show. And to be honest, I've been a little disappointed that they're not incorporating more Gen V into this season, but now we're getting to it.
Right.
So
We got some more in 5. You saw the 2
right.
characters
Yeah. And
introduced.
it was kind of interesting because they introduced those characters and they're like totally on Homelander's side, which I don't know, something about that felt off to me. Like they were there and they were just like, "Oh yeah, Homelander will do whatever you want." Like,
Well, because
I don't know, it was weird.
that's how it ended in Gen V, because they thought they were doing what's right, because that whole coup they basically had, that superhumans were
Right.
everyone needs to listen to
Yeah.
superhumans, and then Homelander shows up and just snaps whatever chick's
Right.
arm.
I don't know.
So like you're not going to say no to Homelander
Right.
at
No,
that point.
that totally makes sense. Like how they're acting totally makes sense. It was just how they said it that was a little weird to me, because they were like, "Oh yeah, like we're totally in on everything you're doing, Homelander." It wasn't like, "Oh yeah, we're scared of what you're doing, so we'll do everything you say." That was, I don't know,
Well,
and maybe they're just not making a big deal out of it because they've got other things to
right.
move on to. But to me, that was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I don't know.
Or he's their Magneto. They're following him.
Comparing Homelander and Magneto is something that I did not have on my bingo card for today's episode.
For mutant kind,
for all mankind, for all soup kind,
for all soup kind,
Oh my gosh, that's a take. All right, that's going to be definitely clipped and put on social media. Oh my gosh, I'm just completely thrown off by that now. Did not expect Homelander to be compared to Magneto for the boys universe. But anyways, we get Edgar Stan back. He's great in this series in general, so not sad about having him back.
Well, it's not even just his character. I mean, you put Giancarlo Esposito in anything and he crushes it. Any role he does, crushes
he's
it.
incredible. He's really fun to watch in anything he's in. So fun to have him back. A wacky episode.
Wow. Very wacky.
Yeah, as they're trying to track down this virus, they go to like one of his like farms or whatever, and Newman has like basically started a lab there to like produce the virus. It somehow gets to all the farm animals, and you've got super flying vampire sheep.
Yep.
That are murdering and tearing apart everything that lives.
and don't forget the V'd up chickens.
The chickens, are exploding through the laboratory assistants' bodies. Wow. I was not expecting this show is. That's the great thing about The Boys, is you never know what to expect.
Yeah.
Like there's no way that you can predict what is going to happen. Like storyline wise, you can kind of see the beats and where they're going, but like you have zero clue how they're going to get there. And this is another, just proves that it's like, what is happening right now? They're running away from, this is like a horror movie,
right?
Running away from super sheep,
flying vampire sheep.
Just what is going on? So wild. So they use the last dose of virus that they have to inject a sheep or a dead carcass that the sheep eat and eventually die. So wow. Wild episode. I don't even know what else to say about that episode. It's just classic The Boys. Wild, crazy, fun. It was definitely fun.
Oh
but
yeah.
just trying to connect that episode to the last 4 that we had,
Oh,
especially with
right.
Homelander ending episode 4 with such a heavy, ending scene. Just
Right. Well, that's also very much in the vein of the boys that you have such a heavy episode of 4 and everything you
Yep.
had from that, and then to follow it up with 5 of just like, you know what, we're just
Yeah.
gonna go bonkers with it. Totally
Yeah.
a totally different take. You're like, all right, well, I'm here for it. Like,
yeah, crazy. Anyways,
oh
we
my
got to move
goodness.
on to the Acolyte, so we got to wrap.
I was gonna throw out one other
up
thing
here.
on the boys
Oh yeah,
though,
go for it.
especially after episode 5. I don't know. My theory right now, I'll just bounce this one off you because you've been watching it.
Right. Yep.
I think I don't remember the character's name. It's Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character, the CIA agent.
Yeah. Okay. I'm here.
Very much like that he's in this season, but something that just kind of popped me with in my head watching episode 5. He's a figment of Butcher's imagination.
I'm 100% in on this theory.
Butcher's wife is the good part of his imagination. That dude's like the bad, not the bad, but like, hey, you're doing this for the mission. And I think when Butcher blacked out and killed Solomon or whatever, I think that dude, that part of his mind took over, and that's what controls Butcher's powers.
Yep. I'm very interested in that theory. I heard that before this episode, but this episode specifically, at the end of the episode, Butcher's talking to, I don't even remember who he's talking to, honestly, but he looks over at that guy, and the person that he's talking to looks over too and like looks kind of bewildered,
Right.
and then they like cut it, like that's all you get. And I'm like, okay, that's definitely a foreshadowing of something going on. So yeah, I'm 100% in on that. And honestly, I love it. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, great addition to the season. And he hasn't even really done much besides like just be, beside Butcher the whole time. But I'm guessing there's going to be something big that happens with him.
Well, right. But then even still, like, look back on the other episodes. The only other times he's been with Butcher is when it's just him and Butcher.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. No one else has been around them. So I'm like, there's something more there.
Very cool way to bring in a phenomenal actor to this series. So if that happens, I'm all in. I don't think, to me, it makes the series a whole lot better because I think Jensen Ackles as Soldier Boy was just was a phenomenal season. I don't think this season's going to live up to that, but it's classic The Boys. It's great stuff.
Yeah.
I'd be giving these last 2 episodes a solid like 5.5, kind of the same thing as House of the Dragon. Like great building episodes. Episode 4. I think you're right. It is a top 5 episode. That one I'd be willing to give that one a 6 out of 6 because that's a great episode. Whew. Heavy.
I agree. And then now that we got Jeffrey Dean Morgan in this season, now season 5, we just need Jared Padalecki, and we have the supernatural trifecta.
There you go. Yeah,
exactly. Well, because it's not only that, because Kripke.
Yeah,
did
that's what I was just going to say.
Supernatural.
Didn't Kripke do the first 5 or 6 episodes or seasons of Supernatural?
I mean, he did a bunch of them. So it's been a lot of that recurring. So I'm just like, well, he got Jensen Ackles, he got Jeffrey Dean Morgan. You gotta finish it out.
I will hand it to Eric Kripke. Like the way he has created this series is phenomenal, especially from a average to subpar source material. Yeah. And just elevated the source material. Like, dude has done an incredible job on this series.
I couldn't agree more. It's been great.
Yeah.
And excited to see how it goes and how it ends, how the story wraps up. Because obviously it's different from the comics. And I mean, that's what everyone always said too, that the comics ending sucks. So it's like, well, it's probably a low bar to make it better. So let's see what we got.
Yeah. And it would not surprise me at all if they, at any point, I don't even know if they've been following any of the comic storylines, but if at any point they just completely ditch the comics, I wouldn't know, for one, and I wouldn't care because what everybody says is that the comics aren't that good. So I'm not planning on. I've read a couple single issues and was not interested in reading anymore. Let's just leave it at that. All right. Anyways, on to the Acolyte. gosh, we didn't even leave enough time for this, honestly, because I feel
I
like
know,
we're
I
going
was
to
gonna
talk about this
say.
more. So, episodes 5 and 6 of the Acolyte. Episode 6 just dropped last night. I don't even have a episode name on IMDb for the one that dropped last night. But episode 5 and 6, we got episode 4, the very end, which we again talked about on episode 201 of the Infinity Bros podcast. Episode 4 ends with the Acolyte, or whatever they're calling him, the Stranger, on all of like the IMDb boards and stuff like that. He shows up, very cool horror scene, like just drops in, floats in the background, and then force pushes all of the Jedi away to end episode 4. Episode 5, some phenomenal lightsaber choreography. We got cortosis, which is what his helmet is made up of. It's a kind of like a material that they actually ended up canonizing in episode 6, because it's been in like Legends,
Yeah.
it's material, and it's a material that can short out lightsabers,
Which is
basically.
really cool.
Which is a really cool concept. Yeah. Very cool that they brought it into, canon in this series. Great design on that helmet too. It looks super creepy, incredible. Love it. But wow, episode 5, I feel like even though it elevated the series hasn't been great, so it's not really that hard to elevate at this point. But yeah, this is honestly some of the best lightsaber choreography that we've gotten probably since Disney took over Star Wars, because the sequels had that like really emotional fights between like Kylo Ren and Rey and stuff like that, which it's not comparable to the crazy choreography that we got between Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen in episode 2 and 3, but there's that emotional part of it that still made them fun fights to watch. But the choreography in this episode, very good lightsaber fights,
like we've mentioned in the past, and it's something that we always talk about. It was finally this is Star Wars moment.
Exactly.
100%. It was this is Star Wars moment, and it's not even fair to call it refreshing, because like this is what you're here for, but you're finally there's something.
Yeah.
There's
that was the feeling, that you got.
I feel was like worthwhile.
Finally that we got a just epic Star Wars moment or episode.
Yes.
Some really cool moments during the lightsaber fighting was he's using his helmet to like headbutt lightsabers to short them out. At one point, I thought immediately of Indiana Jones. He does the lightsaber, like stabs it through him, force pulls another Jedi onto the lightsaber, like stacking them into the lightsaber.
Wild.
Immediately thought of Indiana Jones, where the 3 Nazi dudes are on top of the tank and he shoots his pistol and it goes through all 3 of them. I was like, yes, let's go. That was an amazing moment. And then, we get Jeki takes Kilnaka's lightsaber. She dual wields, has a sweet fight scene between her and the Stranger. And Soul gets in there a little bit with her as well. Honestly, some like Duel of the Fates vibes from that portion of the duel. Really cool to see, like, the Master, the Apprentice versus the Stranger, and, all the stuff that goes along with that. He puts 3 holes in Jeki, kills her
real quick. Real quick.
Yeah. And it was very fast, very quick action until he kills her. He kills her and she knocks his helmet off. And that's when we get the reveal that Kumir is the Stranger, which, everybody saw coming from a mile away, after that last episode where he is, in the forest with May, gets trapped, and then we magically don't see him again.
Right.
What did you think about the reveal of Kumir becoming the Stranger?
Initially, I first thought, and like we talked about in the episode 2, that I thought it was going to be like the red herring. But then after they actually got into it, I was like, all right, this was actually well done. Like, I actually very interested. Well, not well done. Like, you could totally see the other side that, like, all right, it wasn't a huge twist, but like, I'm not mad that it wasn't,
Right. It wasn't
It,
so obvious that it made me upset. It still
well,
was like
it's
gave
one
you
of those
enough
things.
foreshadowing to like.
Well, it was enough foreshadowing, but even still, even if you looked at it like it's super obvious, like it was still done that like I'm not mad about it. Like
Right.
I thought it was set up well, the character was done well, and like it actually made me super interested more in this character because like the fight scene was cool, like a lot of that dialogue. Like I was like, all right, except this is a Star Wars thing. He looks sweet as a villain. The fight choreography was very well done. Like we said, the mask, and not only the mask, but then how he had like the cortosis gauntlet, the way it
Yeah.
was like deactivating, like everything about that was very cool, very well done. My initial thing after the first reveal, because just how it was the like the bare arms, his arms were kind of dirty,
Yeah.
and just the way he was wearing, I got huge Terran Malicos vibes from Fallen
Ooh,
Order, and then
yeah.
the two had the two lightsabers. I was
Mhm.
like, it reminded me of that fight.
Yeah, for
And
real.
if you've played Fallen Order, that is such a sweet fight. I know Isaac has nightmares about it because it took him
I
forever to
still
beat
do.
Terran
Yeah, it took
Malicos.
me hours to be that good. That fight specifically is how I learned to parry in video games because I was so bad at it and didn't even need it up until that point in the
And then you
game.
get to that point and you're like, oh,
If
I
you get
need
to
to
that
do
point and
this.
you haven't learned how to parry, you need to learn at that fight because you cannot beat that stinking guy without parrying. I spent hours on that stupid fight, and it's not even that hard of a fight. I just am not good at
Not
parrying
good
in
at
video games.
parrying.
So yeah, that I totally like see that though. Like that's a really cool comparison. I never even thought of that, but like Terran Malicos gets those not Sith but absolute bad guy vibes.
Right. And that's why I thought that kind of fit because Kabir, like, obviously he's not saying he's a Sith, but
Hmm.
very much the dark side, kind of those vibes. And it was kind of the same with Terra Malicos of just like, not a Sith. He doesn't necessarily ascribe to the Sith order, but very much a dark side user and a very
Hmm.
powerful one.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I saw some of those similarities and I was like, it had that feeling. And I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
And but like I said, I think that ties into it because Terran Malicos was a cool character in Fallen Order.
Hmm.
So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm here for it. I'm totally okay
Right.
with this.
Yep, I thought it was an amazing episode. Was really fun to see some of those. And one of the big things that I want to bring up and talk about is we get a musical theme that is very interesting and it totally makes sense to this guy and his potential backstory. We get Kylo Ren's musical theme when he's revealed, and then at the end of episode 6, after the credits have played, Kylo Ren's musical theme plays again. And that was actually part of the reason I spoke to you on the Patreon episode about how my wife and I watched episode 6, and then I was like, man, I got to go back and watch The Force Awakens because I saw a comparison on social media of like the musical themes of
Mhm.
Kylo Ren and when the stranger is revealed and at the end of the episode, and I was like, man, I got to go back and see Kylo Ren. And when before Kylo Ren reveals himself as Kylo Ren, like the vibes between the comparison between him and the stranger with the helmet on, they're very similar. Very similar. So, my theory is that this dude is the first of the Knights of Ren, like the order of the Knights of Ren. And I think that if it's not already established, he's going to be the one to establish it. I don't know how this is all going to play out because he says in the conversation between him and Soul that he's not Sith, but that's exactly what a Sith would say.
Right.
So like I don't know, maybe he is technically a Sith,
I
but I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's been such kind of a prevalent theme that we've gotten into, but at the same time, maybe that's something they go away from because this is 100 years before that. But like,
Right.
because you've had that before, like with Balin Skull, who's gone beyond that, the former Jedi, but not a Sith. Like
Right.
that's kind of the direction I feel like kind of Star Wars in general has moved towards, and I'm here for it. But like in this setting of it being 100 years before, I think it's more Sith aligned, but like the Jedi basically hunted out all the Sith. Like, no, that's forbidden. I don't think Gamir. I mean, he definitely could use that as the progenitor of like the Knights of Ren, but like the original in canon, which it's Ren starts the Knights of Ren,
Right.
but like you look at the Acolyte because Kamir's looking for a pupil,
Right.
So maybe this story ends where it's not Osha or May, and then maybe this ends with him finding Ren.
True, that could be. And we get you just mentioned like he's looking for a pupil. There's I think 2 mentions of the power of 2
right
in this episode by Kamiris, especially. Like he knows the power of 2. I mean, we get Yoda in the prequel series, like always 2 there are, like that's a prevalent theme in the prequel series. Like there's always 2. And it kind of like, if you're getting real technical about it, it kind of gets a little silly because obviously if you go way back, there's like a whole planet of Sith people and stuff like that. But
that's how it all began. Because was it Darth Bane that starts the rule of 2? Because he believes was what led to the Sith downfalls because there was too many Sith.
There's too many Sith,
and there was too many competing ideas. So he cuts it down to the rule of 2 because you could like consolidate power basically. So and that's jumping way back 1,000 years because that was the whole Jedi Sith war when there was whole armies of both sides.
And the power of 2 thing where it gets like technical to me is like, how would Yoda have known that? Like if the Sith hadn't been around for a millennia, like what, that's we're getting into like nitpicky lore stuff that ultimately doesn't matter because it's Star Wars and there's so much crap out there that
it's Yoda. It's Yoda. If he says there's 2, there's 2.
Yeah, exactly. You just take him at his word. It's Yoda. But yeah, it's there's some really good stuff with Kamir the Stranger. Episode 6, we get him taking Osha back to his planet, which they label as an unknown planet. Looks very similar to the little island that Luke is on.
I was going to say
Jedi.
Very eerily similar.
Yep. And I've never seen a title card in Star Wars that says unknown planet. So like, I feel like they're trying to hide something here.
Right.
So that is another, I kind of like how they're making all these references to, other Star Wars things. Like that's part of the series that, that's just Star Wars, man. Like that's part of, watching The Force Awakens. I only got through probably like the first 45 minutes last night, but like there's so many references, like, and that's what people say about The Force Awakens is that it's like just like nostalgia, a ton of it. And that's what I love about it. That's what makes The Force Awakens such a great movie to me, is because they incorporated all this nostalgia that you have with Star Wars with the first Star Wars release in 20 years type of thing. But I just, I love The Force Awakens and the fact that they intertwined all those other projects, those previous Star Wars, things into it. Love that. So I'm digging how they're kind of taking some small pieces, not so much of an like overload of, nostalgia like The Force Awakens was, but taking these little pieces of the Star Wars universe that we do know and incorporating it into this show. Loving that about the show.
I was going to say too, from that though, like what if they just like lean into the bit and they aren't doing the unknown planet for mystery? Like what if they're like, no, the name of that planet is actually unknown.
That would be
like,
great.
Unknown is the name of it, just to stick it to
like
you.
The Pokemon Unknown, yeah. Right?
Yep.
Love that. That would be amazing.
That'd actually be kind of funny. I couldn't even be that mad about it.
Get like, more Basil in episode 6.
Yep.
Love that.
I'm okay with that.
I love that he just pops up in the ship again and he's like, okay, here's another point of contention. At the end of episode 6, I shouldn't even say the end. It's kind of towards the middle-ish, but it's implied that Basil is the one that tells Master Soul that Osha is actually May.
Yeah.
Here's the thing on the internet that's been going around. Do you think Master Soul should have known that was May, or that it was May prior to that?
I mean, he should have.
Yeah, he should have, right?
But it's kind of a whole thing of the Jedi of not knowing things that they should know. Like it's kind of on point.
Right, exactly. That's kind of the overarching theme of the High Republic is that like, hey, we're so confident in what we're doing that we are oblivious
Right.
to what's actually happening.
And part of it, like, you want to feel that way too, 'cause just like how quickly Kamir knew. Like, you'd think, you're just like, Saul can't be that dumb.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like, it just.
Part of it is too that like he just witnessed his whole group get murdered. He's in like
True.
a state of just panic at this point. I think initially that's what he like maybe looks and he's like, oh, that's interesting. But then he just like, he's so invested in what the situation is at that point that he doesn't even think about, who, if that could be May or whatever. Like that's just over his head at this point. But we get through half the episode and I'm like thinking, once he slows down a little bit, he's got to realize that, right?
Right.
And then they do make the implication because, like, when he stuns her and Soul moves over, Basil's right behind him. Like, love that. Just,
I think the only thing that would have made that better is just keep Soul out of it. Just Basil. It just should have just been Basil there.
Dude, for real, that would have been amazing. I would have been 100% in on that.
Just have Basil dragging her to Saul. Like, no, this ain't right.
This ain't the one. Yeah,
let Basil be the hero.
So good. And then other side of the unknown planet here, May obviously is there. The stranger brings her back to his like base or whatever. Kind of weird. Not like relevant part. Like, dude goes out swimming naked.
Like, see, and this is just back to my
plot
beef
at all.
Like,
what is going on here?
This is back to my beef, and like, I'm glad we're kind of to this part because I didn't want to dwell on the happiness that 5 of that fight had.
Right.
You get into 6, and I feel like it went back to this mediocre. You're just like, this dude, like, they want this like tragic bad boy. You're like, no. This dude is close to a Sith Lord. Like, this dude's not gonna be, gonna go for a swim. He's not gonna be having these deep Jacob from Twilight conversations with Osha. Like, no, this dude is a freaking like Sith Lord. He's gonna be all about the corruption and power. Not like this.
He is
whiny,
not taking the typical Sith corruption route,
right? And I'm just May. Like, but like, you had that in episode 5. Like, you had this absolutely powerful, evil, menacing person.
Yeah.
And then now they're just be like,
now they toned him back,
and they just toned it back, and I'm just like, no, like this just doesn't work, and it just ruined everything that I felt was built up in 5.
Yeah.
And like, I've had it up here, and for me, it just brought it way back down to what the rest of the show's been.
I feel you. I one thing I do like about that is how she grabs his lightsaber and he's just calm as can be and just lets her keep it. That part I was like, oh, this guy,
right?
Like,
he knows he's in charge. Like, he knows
he's
not a threat. Right?
That was pretty cool. But I totally agree with you on the rest of that. Like, the swimming naked scene is totally irrelevant. She doesn't even acknowledge it. Why do you even have that in there? That just it's so weird.
That's just bizarre. And then it just, even just the whole overarching part of the episode, it's what bothered me too. Like, you get a little bit of pieces, but you're just like, when you watch, and this was my emotion of it too, when the credits rolled. This episode, for episode 6, we only have 2 more episodes. This episode accomplished nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially from what we had, everything from 5. It ramped up the story, did all this stuff, and then we get 6, and you're just like, I'm in the same place at the beginning of the episode as I am at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
All we know now for sure is, okay, well, both people know that they have the opposite twin. But you're like, this didn't advance anything. Like, you're just like, what was the point of this episode? And it's just so meh. And which was something I'm just like, what I've begun to realize at work kind of last week more. And just even most of the conversation we've had on the Acolyte so far is the fact that the least interesting part of this series is your main characters. I don't care what happens to May and Osha. Give me more Kamir. Give me more Saul. Heck, give me more Basil. Give me more. give me more Jackie.
Yeah.
Every other side character is so much cooler and so much more interesting.
Right.
And like even after episode 5, like I want to know what is this backstory between Kamir and Soul. Like I am so much more invested in all these side characters, but then you get Mayor Osha back on there. I'm like, I just don't care. They're so uninteresting to me that they bring the level of everything back on the show down that you're just like, it's just, it's so boring.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, just get to the next thing. Get me more of Saul. Get me more, like I
They're
don't care.
trying to
And that's such a
build this.
bad spot to be in for your main show when the worst part of your show are your main characters. Like it's just tough.
And we've talked about it previously, but they're trying to market this show as a mystery, and the mystery is just not that interesting
Right.
in this show. Like,
Well, at this point, it's non-existent.
right. Yeah.
Like there is no mystery anymore.
I mean, there's things that we don't know yet, but it's not any more of a mystery than literally any other show when you are just letting the story play out and you don't
Right.
know the future of the show.
Well,
Like,
it's a bad mystery because part of the mystery is you're getting some of the answers, but then you're also getting new questions. This show, like, I'm not getting new questions, and the answers I'm getting, I really am not getting new questions or answers. I'm getting little ones, but there's nothing that keeps me looking forward to like next episode of like, oh, what is the overarching stuff? What is, and that's what I mean by I'm just like, your main characters are supposed to be the ones driving this mystery, driving this story, and they're not.
yeah.
They are not doing that in this show.
Right. We did get that part in episode 5 where we basically had May and Osha facing off against each other. And, I thought that was going to be a bigger deal, honestly. Like it wasn't as interesting as I thought it was going to be, unfortunately.
Right.
And that was kind of the building tension between May and Osha is like, oh, when they face off, like, oh, it's going to be really cool. And it just, I don't know, didn't live up to the hype. So,
right.
Anyways, yeah, I got to wrap things up here, Zane.
Yep.
So, what
I can tell.
Yeah. Well, he's getting ready to go here. But what would you rate episodes 5 and 6 of The Acolyte?
I mean, episode 5, I'll put that up at like a 5.
Mhm.
It felt Star Wars. It was good. There was some stuff, some of the dialogue still clunky. You're just like, but like the fighting stuff on point. That's what we wanted.
Yeah.
Episode 6, like it just didn't make, like that's back to like a 3. Like it's just, this episode didn't need to happen. I was just bored the whole time. I was just like, I don't care. Like obviously it just, you had such a peak with 5 and then you're just back to such that mediocre of what the rest of the show has been.
Yeah.
I just was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I feel that. I think I'm not going to be quite as harsh on the rest of the show. I'd give that episode 5 a 5 as well. Great lightsaber choreography, great fight, great showdown. The story still kind of wasn't there in that episode, but it made up for it in the action and
Right.
the lightsaber fight and all
Agreed.
that stuff. Episode 6, we're back to a 4 out of 6 for me. I'm still invested in the story enough to keep watching the show. But like, again, I mentioned in our Infinity Bros group chat, this is the last 2 episodes are going to have to absolutely knock it out of the park in order for me to put this show overall above a 4, which is
Right.
kind of saying something because, I mean, I'd say this is even comparable to my least favorite Marvel Disney Plus series, Miss Marvel. It's good. Like the production is good. It's just not as interesting as everything else that Marvel or Star Wars has put out.
I still,
You know?
I don't even know how to put it as far as the production good. Because like I said, like it's been something we've said the entire time. The whole series cost what 180 million. I still don't see.
Well,
yeah, finally saw it in episode 5 with the fights. I get it, but like everything else, you're just like,
yeah. And
the expectations should be much higher.
I mentioned, again on the Patreon, going back and watching the sequel movies. Wow, like you can tell everything is just so much better. And again, that's a big movie production, so like that's
Right.
understandable. But at the same time, when you're spending 25 plus million per episode on a show, there's got to be a slightly higher level of production than
Right.
we're getting on this series, unfortunately. So I get definitely where you're coming from. I'm giving it a tiny bit of grace because it's a TV series, but it's not where it should be. The production's still better than most, maybe not most, a lot of TV shows series out there. So I'm still at a 4 out of 6. But again, this is going to be my least favorite Star Wars show unless they really kick it up 17 notches in episodes 7 and 8. So it is what it is.
Agreed.
Well, there we go, Zane. Another Zane and Isaac mess around completed.
Yes.
Listeners, if you want to check out more of our Zane and Isaac's mess arounds, you can go to our backlog at theinfinitybros.com or on your favorite podcast app of choice. You can check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X, or whatever they're calling it these days. Threads. We just hit 1,000 followers on Threads, Zane. We're really, really invested in that. So
that's so big time.
Big time for Zane.
The
Make sure to check us out at theinfinitybros.com. It's got all our links. Thank you, Zane, for joining me for another Zane and Isaac mess around.
No, Isaac, thank you for joining me for another Zane and Isaac mess around.
Thank you, Zane. I've never said that to you.
I got you, boo.
You're so caring. I love that about you.
I do what I can.
And thank you, listener, for joining us wherever you're listening, however you're listening. Thank you so much for making us a part of your podcast experience. We love you 3000.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infinity Bros podcast. You can find the Infinity Bros on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at The Infinity Bros. You can also check out our website at theinfinitybros.com for links, reviews, and sweet merch. Feel free to send us listener feedback via social media or email at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com.